Number 7. Dylan Spiderman Thomas. An Aussie holidaymaker ended his first trip to Bali with a bite rather than a bang. Back in 2014, the 21-year-old had traveled with mates from Western Australia to the tropical haven of Indonesia. One Saturday morning, he woke up with a seemingly innocent scratch along his stomach. As it wasn't irritable, he wasn't alarmed and went on with his day. But 24 hours later, the deep red scratch had not lessened. After seeking medical advice at Bali International Medical Center, doctors assured him it was just an allergic reaction to an insect bite, and was prescribed antihistamine cream and sent on his way. 48 hours after the unexplained red trail had appeared, it had not only grown in length, but had begun to blister the surrounding skin. In 2 days, it had doubled in size, and upon returning to the hospital, Dylan was seen by a dermatologist. The painful allergic reaction was reportedly a spider that had burrowed its way under his skin through his appendix scar, earning him the new nickname Spiderman. Dylan claimed the spider was removed through his belly button and was no bigger than the size of a match head. The creature was sent away for analysis to determine the species, where the story goes cold. A spider expert from Perth followed up to discredit Dylan's claims by saying that they don't have the tools, the armature to do that sort of stuff. He said it was much more likely to be some sort of burying mite. Sorry, Dylan, but you'll have to switch from Spider-Man to might not be true, boy. Number 6. From Belize to Colorado via Dallas. In 2007, a man named Aaron Dallas was spending a lot of time, both figuratively and literally, scratching his head. The confused Carbondale native started to notice large, developing lumps on his head. The offending lumps would ooze, bleed, and even burst. Worst of all for him, the pain was so severe that it would leave him on his knees. The first doctor he saw told him they were infected with insect bites. The specialist he visited in Denver also made an incorrect diagnosis, telling Aaron it was shingles disease. Describing the evolution of the pain, it was first like being knuckled in the head, and it then turned into a needle, and then finally a nail. After several failed attempts by other physicians, Aaron returned to his local GP. It was here he got the correct diagnosis, but probably not one anyone expected. Dr. Kimball Spence could now see the cause of the problem. Botfly larvae were living in between his skull and skin. One nurse reportedly nearly fainting at the discovery. Doctors removed 5 baby botfly larvae from his head. Each was about 3 millimeters thick after feasting on their host for about 5 weeks. Most likely put there recently by a mosquito whilst he and his wife spent time in Belize, a part of the world where botfly infections are not uncommon. Number 5. That nagging feeling. Rosemary Alvarez was presenting with symptoms that included numbness in her extremities, headaches, and blurred vision. Although to some this might sound like the average hangover, Alvarez was concerned enough to visit the emergency room twice. Twice having a CAT scan and twice receiving a clean bill of health. Third time's the charm, and finally, the Phoenix area woman was given an MRI on her next visit. The level of detail in the scan gave doctors real cause for concern this time. Neurosurgeon Dr. Peter Nakaji told Rosemary they had spotted an anomaly in her brainstem, which unfortunately for her is the deepest part of the brain. When they got to the operating room, many became confused as Dr. Nakaji started to laugh when he discovered the cause of the mass. Thankfully, the doctor had not lost his mind but was actually laughing in relief. Rather than a tumor, it was just a friendly parasitic tapeworm eating her brain. Once the worm was removed, Alvarez recovered with no additional or lingering health concerns. Where did it come from? The likely answer is quite off-putting. She must have been served food that included the fecal matter of another human infected with a tapeworm. Biological experts confirmed that if the worm had been ingested through undercooked pork, it would have ended up in her intestines and potentially passed through. The larval cyst must have therefore entered her bloodstream and made its way to her brain. They say follow your gut, not your head. She must have had a pretty strong gut feeling about her head. Number 4. The Adventures of Mermaid Man and... Chris Johnson had a nagging injury that he continuously ignored, in the hopes time would heal all wounds. Some stereotypes are stereotypes for a reason, and as a man, he suffered for over a month with a discolored and inflamed hand, going to the ER only when he noticed a new growth. He likened said growth to a fingernail sprouting from the middle of his palm. By the time he and his wife made it to the ER, the pain was so excruciating that Chris was screaming, prompting nurses to give him morphine just to relieve his agony. A doctor noted the white pimple growing from Chris's hand and believed it to be MRSA, a killer bacterial infection that can cause similar white growths. Chris was prescribed a strong antibiotic, and a sample of the growth was taken for a biopsy. After a week passed with only inconclusive biopsy results, Chris was sent to Arizona for world-renowned orthopedic hand surgeon Dr. Paul Zeidel for a consult. The trip was a disappointment, as Dr. Zeidel was left stumped as to what it could be. By this time, Chris's hand was so red and swollen, the doctor's talk of amputation began. But Dr. Zeidel had news for Chris, both good and bad. His biopsy had returned with a result. Alongside a rare waterborne bacterial infection, Chris's hand was playing host to a sea creature. Through a tiny cut on his finger, his hand fingernail was actually growing barnacles protruding from under his skin. Closely related to crabs, barnacles produce one of the strongest known natural adhesives to remain glued to their host. They grow hard calcium plates as protective shells, which gives them their distinctive look, and in turn, Chris's agony. Still on strong antibiotics, Chris had to go through repeated surgeries to scrape the growing barnacle attached to his tendon and grueling physical therapy sessions. Nearly a year on from the moment he remembers cutting his finger on a barnacle, Chris had to hand it to Dr. Zeidel and his team. He was free from the crustaceans. Number 3. South Korean sushi. Unsurprisingly, the woman in this next skin-crawling anecdote did her best to remain anonymous. The 63-year-old woman was eating a partially cooked squid when, after biting down on her dinner, she immediately felt sharp pricking inside her mouth, causing her to spit out the squid. What she had failed to account for when preparing the meal was the squid's still intact internal organs. Despite not swallowing any of the offending meat, she was still left with quite a mouthful. As the pain intensified, the woman was rushed to the hospital. Doctors were so astonished by what they saw, it was published in the Journal of Parasitology in 2018. 12 small white foreign bodies were found inside her mouth, which were identified as spermatophores, or essentially squid semen. These spindle-shaped creatures were complex but not fully formed, having no eyes or tentacles. Doctors confirmed that, despite this, the little offspring had attached themselves to the Korean woman's tongue, gums, and cheeks. Squids move quickly when it comes to dating, and had successfully impregnated her before dinner was over. Fortunately, once surgeons had removed the unwanted dependence, the woman healed without any further incident, aside from being left a little flush in the cheeks. Reports of a similar incident involving a 21-year-old Japanese woman were documented in 2014. Anyone fancy calamari for lunch? Number 2. It's a twin thing. Sanju Bhagat was in most ways an average 36-year-old Indian male. Residing in the city of Nagpur, he didn't stick out, apart from one discerning feature. Sanju always had a rather big belly. Nothing he did could change it. Despite exercise and diets, his gut prevailed. Life is fast-paced in India, and life hit Sanju hard one day in June of 1999, when his stomach had become so swollen he struggled to breathe. The farmer had been taken to the hospital, and concerned about the possibility of a large tumor, doctors decided to immediately open him up. Its removal hopefully would finally ease the pressure it was causing on the patient's diaphragm. Sanju was transferred to a hospital in Mumbai to see a specialist, but all the experience in the world could not have prepared the team for what they would find. As Dr. Mehta made an incision, cutting deep into the patient's stomach, gallons and gallons of fluid flowed out. Mehta reached inside Sanju and remembers, "To my surprise and horror, I could shake hands with somebody inside." There was a lot of bone in there. Another doctor in the operating theater said, "First, one limb came out, and then another limb came out, then some part of genitalia, then some part of hair, some jaw, fingernails. The ball-shaped humanoid that was removed from Sanju had well-developed feet and hands. What the team had discovered is one of only about 90 documented cases of fetus in fetu in medical history. Fetus in fetu happens early in the stages of twin pregnancy, with the dominant fetus enveloping the other. Usually, both twins die due to the strain of sharing a placenta, but in this rarest of instances, Sanju had been hosting his twin brother for 36 years. The enveloped parasitic twin had become connected directly to Sanju's blood supply. Upon its removal, Sanju's pain and breathing issues immediately subsided. He now continues to live a normal life, although reportedly his neighbors still tease him about being pregnant, because life isn't hard enough for a single parent. Number 1. Fishy Spa. For a brief period, having a pedicure by fish appeared to be quite the norm. But like most trends, it did not last. Although many forgot about that brief period, it's safe to say that it left a lasting impression on one Chinese man. 56-year-old Zhang Nan learned the hard way that just because one cleaner fish might nibble away at the dry skin on your feet, it doesn't mean that another won't be eyeing up a larger prize. Whether unique or bizarre, this particular beauty establishment used live eels rather than the red gara fish. Initially, everything was going to plan, and Nan was feeling younger already. But youth is fleeting, and the relaxing dip turned into an outlandish nightmare. He recounts, "I could feel the eels nibbling my body, but then suddenly I felt a severe pain and realized a small eel had gone in to the end of my penis. Looking down and seeing just the tip, the 56-year-old grabbed at it. As you may imagine, it was very slippery, and despite his best efforts, the entire length of the eel disappeared up his urethra. He was rushed to the hospital and underwent a 3-hour surgery to remove his invasive guest. Unfortunately for the eel, it didn't come quickly enough, and it was already dead when surgeons pulled it from Nan's bladder. Ironically, Dr. Wang was assigned to the case, and when later asked about its size, Wang said it was a respectable 6 inches long. Thankfully for everyone involved, it didn't bite off more than it could chew. Thanks for watching. Would you rather eat fresh botfly larvae or sit in a bathtub full of maggots? Let us know in the comments section below.